At the very last moment, Alexander leaped onto the departing bus, his swift action fueled by the driver's evident haste to avoid any unnecessary delay at the stop. Amidst the throng of passengers inside, a distant figure waved frantically, but went unnoticed, likely obscured by the crowded interior. Nervous beads of sweat formed on his forehead, his back damp with anxiety. He surreptitiously scanned the bus's interior, but the passengers remained indifferent to his actions, lost in their own worlds. Even those standing behind and around him seemed wholly uninterested in what he had picked up from the floor. Only the driver, momentarily distracted, glanced in the rearview mirror, concerned that the young man might be unwell. But when he realized that Alexander was physically fine, he returned his focus to the road. As the initial rush of excitement waned, Alexander began to mentally explore the various options he had concerning the substantial sum of money now in his possession. The first thought that crossed Alexander's mind was, should I take this to the police? However, he swiftly dismissed the idea, recognizing the risk that the money might be confiscated, and no effort would be made to locate the rightful owner. In such a scenario, a substantial sum would simply vanish into obscurity. No, he couldn't take that chance, especially when he had no inkling as to why a seemingly ordinary girl needed such a significant amount of money. And the nagging suspicion that the money might be ill-gotten or stolen crept into his thoughts. Regardless, he knew he had to act, so as to spare himself from remorse gnawing at his conscience. Finding the money meant he had a moral obligation to return it, regardless of the method. It was imperative that he resist the temptation to keep it for himself. Alighting from the bus at his designated stop, Alexander navigated through a shopping center, past 2 warehouses, and paused near a gatehouse. With a deep sigh, he reconsidered the bundle and carefully stowed it away in his bag, hidden from prying eyes. The last thing he wanted was for it to be stolen. Presenting his pass to the guard, he passed through the turnstile, entering his workplace's premises. Here, amid the familiar surroundings, Alexander began to regain his composure. It was as if he dunked his head into icy water, and his thoughts gradually aligned. He pushed aside any contemplation of what to do with the money, particularly as his colleagues from the same shift started to arrive. They greeted him with smiles and cheery hellos, headed to the changing area, and readied themselves for the day's work. Alexander maneuvered his way forward, gently pushing the man in front to secure a foothold on the flat surface just as he was handed the fare. Turning around, he encountered a girl of striking beauty with captivating blue eyes and long eyelashes. However, her visage bore an unmistakable sadness. Combining his own change with hers, Alexander passed it forward to the driver, who could only offer a resigned nod, juggling the steering wheel with one eye on the road. The bus navigated a sharp turn, and then continued its journey without any unnecessary halts. Finding a comfortable stance, Alexander turned to the melancholic girl and inquired softly, "Is there something troubling your spirits today? Did someone dampen your mood this morning?" She shook her head, her gaze growing distant as she replied, "No, it's just that I'm embarking on a rather significant endeavor, and I'm filled with apprehension." "Ah, I see." Alexander nodded in understanding. "You envision the anticipation of meeting friends or acquaintances waiting for you there, perhaps. That always lifts my spirits, especially when dealing with demanding bosses at work." "Something like that," she admitted. "I'm heading to meet influential individuals as well, and a great deal hinges on the outcome." "In that case, your sadness is quite understandable," Alexander empathized. "The fear that despite your earnest efforts, things might not go as planned." The girl agreed, indeed, especially when human lives are at stake. At that very moment, the driver announced the upcoming stop. "It appears that my stop is approaching," she sighed. "It was nice conversing with you." Alexander replied, "Likewise." The bus came to an abrupt halt, the irate driver shaking his fist in the direction of some unseen offender as the doors swung open in unison. Passengers collectively shifted to make way for those disembarking. In the midst of this frenzied exodus, the girl too hurriedly exited the crowded vehicle, not realizing that a black bag had slipped from her jacket pocket in her haste to escape the stifling bus. Unbeknownst to her, the bag lay forgotten at Alexander's feet as she swiftly descended into the underground passage. As the door sealed shut behind her, Alexander belatedly noticed the abandoned package. Acting on impulse, he retrieved it, hastily tearing it open. His heart nearly skipped a beat as he beheld a stack of 5,000 ruble notes nestled within, a small fortune of nearly $500,000. He had never held such an immense sum in his hands before, not all at once and without any prior anticipation. Nervous beads of sweat formed on his forehead, his back damp with anxiety. He surreptitiously scanned the bus's interior, but the passengers remained indifferent to his actions, lost in their own worlds. Even those standing behind and around him seemed wholly uninterested in what he had picked up from the floor. Only the driver, momentarily distracted, glanced in the rearview mirror, concerned that the young man might be unwell. But when he realized that Alexander was physically fine, he returned his focus to the road. As the initial rush of excitement waned, Alexander began to mentally explore the various options he had concerning the substantial sum of money now in his possession. The first thought that crossed Alexander's mind was, should I take this to the police? However, he swiftly dismissed the idea, recognizing the risk that the money might be confiscated, and no effort would be made to locate the rightful owner. In such a scenario, a substantial sum would simply vanish into obscurity. No, he couldn't take that chance, especially when he had no inkling as to why a seemingly ordinary girl needed such a significant amount of money. And the nagging suspicion that the money might be ill-gotten or stolen crept into his thoughts. Regardless, he knew he had to act, so as to spare himself from remorse gnawing at his conscience. Finding the money meant he had a moral obligation to return it, regardless of the method. It was imperative that he resist the temptation to keep it for himself. Alighting from the bus at his designated stop, Alexander navigated through a shopping center, past 2 warehouses, and paused near a gatehouse. With a deep sigh, he reconsidered the bundle and carefully stowed it away in his bag, hidden from prying eyes. The last thing he wanted was for it to be stolen. Presenting his pass to the guard, he passed through the turnstile, entering his workplace's premises. Here, amid the familiar surroundings, Alexander began to regain his composure. It was as if he dunked his head into icy water, and his thoughts gradually aligned. He pushed aside any contemplation of what to do with the money, particularly as his colleagues from the same shift started to arrive. They greeted him with smiles and cheery hellos, headed to the changing area, and readied themselves for the day's work. "What's up with you? Still half asleep?" his partner quipped, nudging him in the back. Yeah, I'll be there in a moment. You go ahead and prepare your workstation. I'll catch up," Alexander replied with a nod, before slowly making his way to the locker room on the 2nd floor. "All right, just don't take forever." However, ascending the stairs today felt like a daunting task. What once took him a mere 2 minutes to conquer now consumed almost 10. It wasn't a matter of health or strength. His legs, inexplicably, seemed weighed down with lead, reluctant to respond to his commands. It felt as if an invisible force was tugging him back toward the bus, but what could he possibly achieve by returning? The girl had vanished, like a specter in the mist, leaving no trace of her whereabouts. Moreover, Alexander had no experience or knowledge about how to handle such a situation. Embarking on a search with only a vague description of her appearance seemed absurd, considering the city teemed with countless girls matching that description. His foremost priority was to complete his work shift, and then, in the evening, gather the facts and assess his chances for a successful search in the tranquility of his home. Exiting the locker room, Alexander descended the stairs more swiftly, for the heavy burden of the money no longer weighed on his mind. Upon encountering his partner, he mustered a feeble smile and glanced at the machinery. "Nice job, everything's already set up," his partner remarked. "I get to work quickly, unlike some people," he boasted, puffing out his chest with pride. "All right, no need to show off, or you might attract trouble," Alexander cautioned, hoping to prevent his partner from going overboard. "Hey, why were you looking so disgruntled at the gatehouse earlier?" "Don't worry about it. I had a dream last night, that's all." "Will you share it with me?" "Why you want to know? You're not a dream interpreter," Alexander teased. "No, I'm just curious about what you saw," Igor responded, his shoulders slumping in disappointment. "All right, I'll tell you since you won't let it go. Imagine I dreamt of a substantial amount of money, about $500,000. "Why that specific amount?" "I don't know, but that's what it was," Alexander continued, and I was perplexed because I'd never held such a sum before. "So, you didn't know what to do with it, and then you woke up abruptly, right?" Igor chuckled. "Almost precisely as you put it," Alexander agreed. "I felt a pang of sadness that I couldn't use it." "What would you do if you had that much money?" "I'd do a few things, like finally buying a rubber boat. I've wanted one for ages, but my wife won't allow it. I'm always stuck renting it for my neighbor, and he charges an arm and a leg for it." "Is that all? Nothing else?" Alexander asked, surprised by the simplicity of Igor's dream. "No, the rest I'd stash in the bank and let it accumulate," Igor shrugged. "That's a good idea. You've given me something to consider," Alexander replied, his thoughts returning to the bundle of money tucked away in his locker. "Do you think you'll have the same dream again tonight and manage to deposit the money into your account? Then you wake up in the morning, check your card balance, and suddenly you have $500,000, Igor mused. "What nonsense are you talking about?" Alexander grumbled, giving his left shoulder a dismissive shake. "You should be focusing on the machines, or the boss will have another talk with us about the high defect rate." Igor patted Alexander on the shoulder and delved into his work. Nonetheless, the idea stuck with Alexander. He considered where he could temporarily stash the money to relieve the weight of it burning a hole in his pocket. He knew that such a substantial sum could easily tempt someone into hasty decisions, consequences be damned. After completing his shift, Alexander approached his boss and requested a day off for the next day. The boss, with a sly smile, acquiesced, saying, "All right, I'll let you go, but you'll need to make it up later." "Thank you, Sergei Ivanovich. I really appreciate it," Alexander replied. "Go on, or they'll probably start without you." The boss presumed that Alexander had an important event to attend. Alexander left the shop, hurried to shower and change, and nearly sprinted through the gatehouse. The guard barely had time to utter a "see you tomorrow." With his bag in hand, he made his way to the bus stop, waited for his ride, and in 20 minutes reached home. There, a hungry cat awaited him, mewing plaintively and rubbing against his legs. He promptly retrieved a jar of meat pâté from the refrigerator, opened it, and emptied it into a dish. The cat approached, sniffed, cast a grateful look at its owner, and dug into the meal. Clearly, the pâté met the feline's approval as its tail fluffed up in delight. Alexander opted for a refreshing vitamin salad for his meal, eschewing the idea of something fried and dismissing the monotony of sandwiches. He accompanied it with a piece of cake to enjoy with his tea, a dessert that managed to lift his spirits and enhance his cognitive faculties. His mind began to churn with questions. Should I open a regular account or a savings account? In either case, there was no downside. The key was to secure the money swiftly, preventing it from burning a hole in his pocket and stoking reckless and impulsive desires. Succumbing to such temptations would be unforgivable, and the remorse would linger for a lifetime. After a light dinner, he spent the evening engrossed in a comedy series. The cat had their fill of pâté and settled on the sofa. It was only late at night when they both finally settled down, and in an unexpected twist, Alexander dreamt of the found money. Everything unfolded precisely as he had recounted to his partner. Yet before the dream could reach its conclusion, he awoke to the incessant chime of the alarm clock. After a brisk shower and a light breakfast, Alexander donned his weekend suit, gathered all the necessary documents, and headed to the bank. This time, he chose to save money by taking a cab instead of enduring the stuffy bus ride. As he neared the bank, a wave of unease washed over him. He hadn't even prepared for what he would say if they started questioning him about the origins of the substantial sum of money. The thought of being accused of theft loomed large, and the repercussions were dire. The boomerang was coming back, and he had no desire to be caught in its crossfire. At the last moment, Alexander contemplated turning around and driving to the police station instead. But he steeled himself, opened the glass door, and crossed the threshold. There was no turning back, especially since one of the bank employees regarded him with a curious glance. She seemed to have mistaken Alexander for a wealthy client based on his attire. Fortunately, fate intervened at the right moment. A few steps inside the bank, he spotted the girl from the bus. She sat on a leather couch, anxiously fingering her ticket, glancing at the display board, and patiently awaiting her turn. Alexander breathed a sigh of relief and approached her briskly. "Hello there, I've been searching for you all over the city," he exclaimed. "Hello," she responded with excitement in her voice. "Do we know each other? Have you completely forgotten? Then let me refresh your memory. Yesterday morning, the bus, the crowded scene, and we were standing almost right next to each other." "Ah, you're the one who asked about my somber expression." "That's right," Alexander affirmed. "So, does that jog your memory any further?" As the conversation between Alexander and the girl unfolded in the bank, he couldn't help but feel that perhaps a stroke of luck was guiding his actions that day. "I lost the money I collected for my mom's treatment," the girl sobbed, and Alexander moved closer, taking a seat beside her in an attempt to console her. "I came to the bank to apply for a loan. If I don't pay the clinic, there could be dire consequences. You won't need to take out a loan." "I found your package," Alexander replied, reaching into his bag and placing it on her lap. "I didn't touch a single bill, and I didn't even count how much was in the package." "Thank you," the girl said, her voice trembling. "Call me Alexander, but my friends call me Sasha," he replied. "I'm so grateful to you, Alexander. Words can't express it. My name is Ludmila, and there's nearly 475,000 rubles in the package." I had a feeling it was a significant sum, but I want to emphasize that I didn't take a single ruble, Alexander assured her, placing his hand on his heart as if to underscore his honesty. "I believe you, Sasha," Ludmila nodded, her gratitude evident. "One question, why did you come to the bank?" "To open an account, to keep the money safe. I was planning to look for you, and I even thought about placing an ad in the paper or on TV. I'm grateful we didn't have to resort to that. Fate has brought us back together. Do you believe in fate?" "Not all that much, to be honest. I've experienced few happy moments in my life," Alexander replied with a shrug. Ludmila wiped away her tears, took his hand, and guided him towards the exit. Together, they left the bank building and walked to the bus stop. Alexander accompanied Ludmila to the clinic, where she turned over the money to the head doctor to complete her mother's treatment. He waited for almost half an hour as she settled the necessary paperwork and visited her mother in the ward. That day, Alexander not only helped a fellow human being, but also discovered a connection with Ludmila. They decided to continue meeting to get to know each other better. As a routine, Alexander joined Ludmila in visiting her mother. Over time, he built a strong rapport with her, eventually receiving approval for a serious relationship with her daughter.